Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, the climate guy setting the record straight about climate. In this video, I discuss the important question, was Hurricane Harvey caused by climate change? There are stories all over the news saying that Hurricane Harvey has produced record rainfall, and climate scientists are certain it was caused by climate change. But just a couple of weeks ago, things were different. U.S. and longest hurricane drought in history. In a stroke of luck, no major hurricanes have struck U.S. soil during the past 9 years. Today, October 24th, marks 11 years since a major hurricane made landfall in the U.S. That so-called major hurricane drought is the longest on record. So after a record period of no major hurricanes lasting more than a decade, suddenly we get one and experts are sure it was caused by climate change. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. If you were being scientific, it would make more sense to claim that climate change is causing fewer major hurricanes, not more. And it's not just in the U.S. Australia has been seeing the same thing. This story is from March of this year. Cyclone Blanche is latest to cross land and second consecutive quiet season in Australian history. The headline isn't very clear, but what they're saying is it's the latest first typhoon on record in Australia. Blanche crossed the northern coast of Western Australia as a Category 2 storm on March 6th, the latest the season's first cyclone has made landfall in Australian history, according to the Bureau of Meteorology. It's the second consecutive year Australia's cyclone count has been chronically low. Despite the bad grammar, I think the story is still pretty clear. Australia hasn't been having a lot of hurricanes. So finally we get a major hurricane after almost 12 years, and climate scientists do the obvious, they blame it on climate change. Andrew Dessler of Texas A&M said we know sea level rise made the storm surge worse, and warmer ocean and atmospheric temps certainly increased total rainfall. As a Rice graduate, I'm going to try to avoid making Aggie jokes, but this one's a tough call. 6 years ago, the same Andrew Dessler told the Houston Chronicle that Texas was going to be hot and dry for the rest of the century. Now he's saying that warmer air causes more rain. That seems a little bit inconsistent. You can be certain that if Texas wasn't a drought now, Andrew Dessler would be telling the press that he predicted it all along. So whether they get a lot of rain or no rain or a little rain or whatever, Dessler's going to take credit for it. That's how climate scientists operate. They're snake oil salesmen. Texas' other top snake oil saleswoman is Katharine Hayhoe from Texas Tech University. 6 months ago, Katharine Hayhoe wrote a peer-reviewed paper predicting decreases in summer precipitation in Texas due to global warming. The results suggest that projected future decreases in summer precipitation over the south-central region appear to be closely related to anomalous patterns of large-scale circulation already observed and modeled during historical dry years, patterns that are consistently reproduced by climate models. So all the climate models predicted that Texas was going to get really dry. And as soon as Texas gets wet, they say, we predicted it all along. This is already quite a climate clown show, but it gets much worse. The actual NOAA measured temperature data for Texas before data tampering shows that Texas is cooling, not warming. So blaming the rain on warm air doesn't make a lot of sense. In fact, during the storm, temperatures in Houston have been running about 20 degrees below normal. Rain is generally associated with cool air, not warm air. Alaska is the second wettest state in the United States, and it's pretty cold around there. And one of the wettest places in the country is the Olympic rainforest in Washington state. It's very cool up there. Heavy rain is not unusual in Texas. In fact, on Memorial Day in 1935, they set the world's record rainfall. They received 22 inches of rain in 2 hours and 45 minutes. And in 1979, during Tropical Storm Claudette, they got 43 inches of rain in 24 hours. That was long before climate change. And the day before the record rainfall in 1935, Colorado got almost as big a rain, and Colorado is located nowhere near a warm or cold ocean. During the May 30th, 1935 storm in Colorado, we got 24 inches of rain in 6 hours, and at 2 different locations in eastern Colorado. The flooding which occurred in Colorado on May 30th, 1935 had nothing to do with carbon dioxide, which was very low at the time. It had nothing to do with warm air because the air was cool, and it certainly didn't have anything to do with climate change or global warming. And in fact, just a few weeks earlier, Texas had a massive dust storm known as Black Sunday on April 14th, 1935. And on Labor Day in 1935 came the most intense hurricane in U.S. history. It was so strong that it blew this train 30 feet off the tracks in the Florida Keys. The devastation was complete. So in 1935, we had record rainfall, record dust storms, and record hurricanes, and CO2 levels were very low. I call BS on these claims by the climate scientists this year. The deadliest hurricane in U.S. history occurred in 1900 in Galveston, Texas. It killed more than 10,000 people and destroyed half the city. They had to completely rebuild the city. They built a huge seawall, and they actually raised the elevation of the city by 3 feet by bringing huge amounts of dirt in and rebuilding on top of that. And this week in 1886, the city of Indianola, Texas was wiped off the map by a major hurricane. You've probably never heard of Indianola. That's because it doesn't exist anymore. They never rebuilt the city after that storm. 1886 was the busiest hurricane season in U.S. history. The United States was hit by 7 different hurricanes that year. Texas was hit by 4 hurricanes that year. 2 of those hurricanes were major hurricanes, including the one which destroyed Indianola. So in 1886, when CO2 levels were below 300 parts per million, Texas got hit by 4 hurricanes. Now they've been through a record hurricane drought. They get one, and they blame it on carbon dioxide. That's not science. That's superstition. It's stupidity. Alternating periods of drought and flood are the normal climate for places like Texas and Australia. This article is from the Empire in Sydney from October 1868, The Climate of Australia. It documents how Australia is constantly switching between drought, flood, drought, flood, drought, flood. And in fact, in 1850, they had both flood and drought in the same year. And another thing that hasn't changed is placing blame for the climate. Here's an article from 1846 from Australia on the change of climate. That great changes have taken place in the climate of Australia, all testimonies satisfactorily prove. The Aborigines say that the climate has undergone this change since white men came into the country. So people have been blaming climate change on white men for almost 200 years. And long before they started blaming white men for climate change, they blamed witches. In Europe during the 16th century, they burned 15,000 witches at the stake for cooking the weather. And the Salem witch trials in the United States were probably also due to blame for climate change. Delusions about climate change are nothing new. Here's an article from the Brisbane Courier from January 10, 1871. Imaginary Changes of Climate. A plentiful crop of speculation from weather prophets and projectors and half-instructed meteorologists, and all the philosophic tribe of Laputa in general, to whom the periodical press now affords such fatal facilities. Every season is sure to be extraordinary. Almost every month one of the driest or wettest or windiest, coldest or hottest ever known. Much observation, which ought to correct a tendency to exaggerate, seems in some minds to have rather a tendency to increase it. Climate scientists, which to me is a contradiction in terms, know that they can go to the press with any fake story they want to make up and the press will run with it. They won't question it, they won't talk to any skeptics to see if the story makes any sense. Mark Twain wrote, "There is something fascinating about science. One gets such wholesale returns of conjecture out of such a trifling investment of fact." Hurricane Harvey had nothing to do with global warming. In 1963, Hurricane Flora stalled over Cuba and dropped more than 100 inches of rain. And that was right at the peak of the global cooling scare. Now we're in the global warming scare, and they blame it on global warming. Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science for a long time.